Hello, Toastmasters, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. My name is Wayne Harropson, and I'm suing the United States Treasury for over $1 billion. The Treasury is a part of the executive branch, so is a subsidiary of the presidency. There are two means of relief when damages are referred to in court. One is compensatory, and the other is punitive. In an accident, if someone doesn't mean to cause harm, compensatory damages are in order to cover the victim's losses. Punitive damages only apply when the defendant lies about his responsibility and shows no remorse, and so becomes a risk to repeat the crime. In this case, punitive damages are imposed that are calculated to rise to a level to ensure that the perpetrator doesn't repeat the crime again. It's called a deterrent. For a street thug, that might be only $500. For a corporation, it could be in the billions. In my opening summary of the case, I stated that the first audit of my 33-year career occurred shortly after distributing articles at patriotic meetings critical of the administration and the Treasury's preferred political ideology. I told you that the examination process started with intimidation for the purpose of isolating me for their political interrogation, something they quite thoroughly conducted. I told you that two agencies of the Treasury, the auditors and the police that are supposed to keep the auditors in line, executed a plan to punish me for complaining to those police. That was a retaliatory action which elevated the crime from the evident and to the obvious, as I will demonstrate. I described how 4 visions or premonitions in my past proved to me that destiny was preparing me for this very moment in time. One encounter in the 70s, one in the 80s, and then 2 in the 90s. One of those was a vision of Idi Amin. The other was a note to myself what to say when I'm audited by the IRS. All these premonitions over the span of decades were pointing to the future criminal IRS audit that would occur in 2011. In my future testimony, I'll be revealing to you what it was in that note that I wrote to myself in 1990. The note that revealed itself spontaneously while I had the IRS's notice of examination still in my hand. This note was written to be a central part of the adjudication of this case, and therefore the note was written to you, my future jurors. But before I tell you more about that, you are likely wondering, as anybody would, what I expect you to do with all my crazy dreams and visions. You're wondering if I expect you to adopt a belief in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and then take my word on my interpretation of those dreams, and then throw some people in jail. Actually, that'd be okay with me, but the case doesn't require it. Here's what my remarkable spiritual premonitions don't do. My spiritual premonitions don't prove I was targeted illegally. Those premonitions don't prove that I was intimidated to be isolated for a political interrogation. They don't prove I was interrogated to discover more about my dissenting speech and to punish me for my dissent. Neither do they prove that I was retaliated against by the 2 conspiring divisions of the Treasury. My premonitions don't prove anything of the sort, at least for your purposes, nor do they need to. What my visions do is indicate that this crime is so insidious that supernatural intervention was planned in advance. It's important to me that you know how much I believe that. And for me not to be emphatic about that belief of mine would be to perjure myself. For me not to be emphatic about it would be for me to fail to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. Let me cite something from history to compare with what I'm talking about. Winston Churchill recalled a conversation with a childhood friend responding to the question what he would do when he grew up. In recounting this memory, he said he didn't know why he said it as a child, or why he even thought it as a child. But he said to his friend that London and the Empire would be in great danger, and it would fall to him to save the country from destruction. He didn't know why he said it. He didn't know why he thought it. But it all turned out to be true. Winston Churchill was given a prophetic vision into the future that he did not understand when it was given him. I was given a prophetic vision in the 70s that I didn't understand when it was given me. In the 80s, I was guided to the founder's intention of the rear of the Great Seal of the United States, and though I was enthralled by the supernatural means by which it was revealed to me, I did not know at the time just how it applied to my future, the future I'm living in right now. This lawsuit is my obedience to destiny, just like Winston Churchill went on to fulfill his destiny. When challenged about the veracity of his childhood vision, he emphatically declared, "When destiny commands, we must obey." You can see a dramatization of that in a sequence in one of my links. If Winston Churchill was anything, he was a writer. As the author of at least 73 books and hundreds of pamphlets and articles, he was a master of the English language. His destiny was officially fulfilled on May 8th, 1945, as he announced victory in Europe. I was born 9 years later on May 8th, 1953, the year Winston Churchill won the Nobel Prize in Literature. So you must have some idea now where I'm going with this. I am not personally responsible for the Barack Obama is America's Idi Amin prophetic metaphor. I'm only responsible for declaring it. I didn't know what the dream meant in 1990. And without being guided to find my written account of it in 2011, I would have never remembered it. What destiny commanded I do was broadcast the meaning of the dream without knowing it would attract the attention of the IRS that had morphed at that time into America's version of Idi Amin's Ministry of Thought Control, called the Public Safety Unit. You will not be asked to make your final decision on this case on the basis of my visions, my interpretations, or beliefs, but on the evidence, as would be the case in any court proceeding. What does prove all the allegations of corruption true is the foolish stumbling by the defendants as they attempted to stop me from exposing their crime. What does prove my allegations true is the systemic atmosphere of corruption orchestrated at the highest levels of government at the very time of my first audit. What does prove my allegations true are the statements of fact divulged by an honest and embarrassed IRS area manager that add up to a tacit admission that the individual supervising my examination was motivated to execute these illegal Washington policies by his own profoundly political proclivities. Proclivities described by the area manager, Mr. Jeremio, as not local political proclivities, but global political proclivities. Just such a description is in direct opposition to Tea Party patriots' desire that America retain its sovereignty. When this honest area manager is asked to testify, he will be asked to repeat those statements he made to me. And because he exhibits all indications of being an honest person, he'll do so. He'll also be answering questions regarding his own embarrassment when this profoundly political and globally political subordinate of his failed to respond to my multiple requests for his contact information, all of which indicates either arrogance on the part of the subordinate in ignoring my request, which is always possible when people are exercising their tyrannical powers on the defenseless, but more likely the supervisor failed to return my calls because of the embarrassment and fear naturally associated with guilt. Though this supervisor and I are on opposite ends of the political spectrum, it is preposterous to suggest that this man would have executed such a violation of my citizens' rights before he was emboldened to do so by the illegal policies in place in Washington, D.C. What does prove my allegations true is the impossible timing of my having received 2 notices of examination on the very day that I at long last contacted the Treasury police to hear my testimony, and 2 years after the original criminal audit. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that is not a coincidence. It's not. That is the equivalent of a bloody, decapitated horsehead being delivered to your mailbox. There is a sequence in The Godfather where a target and victim of the mob woke to find a bloody horsehead in his bed. That was the same message I was delivered by the IRS and the Treasury police were working together to make perfectly clear what they were willing to do to me to shut me up about their crime. I predict that the defense will claim implausibly that these things happen all the time and that one must be careful not to attribute it to nefarious motives. How many days are there in 2 years? More than 600 days? What are the chances of my receiving a second notice of examination randomly on the very same day that the Treasury police finally emailed me? 1 in 600, to be conservative. How about 1 in 730? The crime of discriminatory political audit, exactly what President Nixon was impeached for, is not just evident in my case, it's obvious. The crime of the cover-up is not just evident, it is obvious. The crime of the retaliatory bloody horsehead audit is not just evident, it is obvious. The defense is going to insult your intelligence, asking you to allow the crime syndicate the benefit of the doubt. I know, because just such an assertion was made by the supervisor. A claim he made actually made me embarrassed for his sake. It was such an embarrassing implausibility, given the remarkable timing, that he, the supervisor, after obvious connection, was too embarrassed and afraid to respond to my requests for his boss's phone number. In my view, this case is so simple that the area manager's testimony may be the only testimony from the defendants required. This area manager, like any other victim employee of a government agency turned crime syndicate, has something to lose for being even as honest as he has been. I mentioned before how my auditor could not admit to the truth even if she wanted to, because of what she could stand to lose. Not necessarily for having participated in the crime, but for turning against the Treasury's crime syndicate. I predict that the manager will be a hero in this case. I predict that his defense attorneys will advise him to either keep quiet or for him to evade answering questions. But I don't think he'll do it. I don't expect anything but lies from the auditor or her supervisor because they have already participated together in the cover-up. I feel sorry for them. and I hope they recant. I am far from being the only victim here, and I hope you're getting a sense of that. Crime syndicates victimize everyone. Let me give you a preview of what else proves my allegations true. You'll hear in subsequent testimony how the Treasury inspector, upon my request, agreed to tape my testimony. He set up an appointment, and then later he had to call me back, embarrassed because the inspector, he was made to call me back by his supervisor, who canceled the taping. There was no real explanation for that. And I wondered, why would they be so afraid to have my testimony on tape? I would then discover that the Laguna Niguel facility where the Treasury police listened to my testimony was named by CNN's Jake Tapper as being one of the principal locations where the illegal IRS targeting had originated. Imagine having first given testimony in a facility about being a victim, and then you discover that the very place you were interviewed was one of only 5 in the nation where the crime had been reported. That's a fascinating sequence of events. No wonder they were worried about recording my testimony on tape. It was too close to home. You're going to hear how the second auditor assigned to the Bloody Horsehead audit, the retaliatory audit of terror, asked me during the preliminary phone interview one question. "How is your health, Mr. Harropson?" Now that is a cute follow-up to having had a bloody horsehead delivered. That's pretty funny. You're going to hear how I delivered the details of my case to multiple agencies of the government, officers of whom are all sworn to protect and defend the Constitution and therefore my rights, and how they return official responses stating that they do not detect that a crime has been committed. Now that is how a crime syndicate is operated. What is the punishment for an administration that deprives a citizen his rights? What is the penalty for being successful at marshaling the subordinated and the agents of the government to rob the citizen his rights? We're talking about the Treasury of the United States here. We're talking about a criminal syndicate with enormous assets. What punitive deterrent will keep that from happening again? You, the jury, get to decide if $1,001,300 comes even close to being enough.